Hello, everyone. This is RJ Jen, and welcome to another episode of hashtag the Blue Mic English Edition, your independent favorites. And today, here with us, we have another wonderful artist. You'll get to know him well. So let's not waste any more time. So, hi, Zain. Welcome to hashtag the Blue Mic English Edition, your independent favorites.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. It's really exciting to be here.
So, first of all, we'll start with the obvious question, that is introduction about yourself and your music.
Okay, so my artist name is Bullibain Bridge, but I'm more than happy to be called Zain. I used to be an artist manager. That's how I started off my musical career. I was with the Blue Frog in Bombay, and then the 2012 leg of NH7's Weekender. And then I switched from that to music production in 2014. I was in the UK studying that. And then I came back and have been doing that ever since, which meant producing music for independent artists, composing music for ads and short film, mobile games, da-da-da-da. And flash forward to 2022, after a pandemic, here I am with an album.
So speaking of your album, artist, congratulations. I mean, wow, it's
Thank you.
It's already the album of the year from us.
That's really awesome to hear. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
So how did you arrive with this song?
So the way the album started, again, I admitted the journey was kind of serendipitous. Since we all had time through 2020 and 2021, at the beginning of 2021, I just started to practice piano more ritualistically. So every day I was on the piano for about an hour. And as I finished my focused practice session, I would just play and just see, because I could touch wood, I could actually feel the changes happen as I practiced. I was like, oh, I couldn't do this thing yesterday. Now I can do it. Great. And once that skill set started to build up, I would just play and I would just come up with chord progressions. And I have this little Logic session, which has all these different chord progressions just saved in there where I was just playing piano. And then if I came up with a chord progression I liked, I just sort of, pinned it for later. And I said, okay, I'll come back to it. And I did this over a span of a couple of months. And then I just ended up coming back to a couple of chord progressions that I just put aside. And then I play them over again. And then, for want of a better way to put it, there was just a sort of penny that dropped in my head going, wait a second, I can imagine this vibe with this particular chord progression. What would happen if I just started adding this? Okay, now what would happen if I started adding that? Okay, wait, what about this now? And then suddenly, like, I'd get maybe an 8-bar loop of some sort of idea. And then I'd be like, okay, this is interesting. I'm going to leave that alone for a couple of days. Let's see if I still like it. And come back a couple of days, more often than not, I'm like, hey, this is still not bad. And then I would then just somehow, I mean, if the idea was good, it was easier for me to start fleshing it out over a span of like a couple of minutes. And I'm like, okay, so the arrangement's coming together. And it's sounding good as an instrumental, but I need a singer on this. And that cannot be me because, God forbid, it's me singing. And then I just listening to the tracks as they came about. In fact, the second song on the album, Monochrome, with Nushis, is in fact the first song I ever came up with. And this kind of happened with all the songs as well, where I just took leaps of faith and I called up each one of them because I worked with them in the past in some capacity or the other. And I just called up and said, hey, I've got this song. Would you be down to collab? And that's really like in a nutshell of how all the songs came to be.
So coming back to your album again, looking at the song list, well, we can see like lots of collaborations are there. So talk to us about the different collaborators, the artists, because one of them is Shalmali, the artist like whose music we've been playing here on our stations. So talk to us more about the collaboration on your album.
The song that she's on is a song called Better Place, which was the first single off the album. It is honestly a very deep song, personal song, very dark song, if I'm being honest with you. And I called her up out of the blue one day because I knew that a lot of her influence stemmed from Amy Winehouse. And the chord progression that I came up for that song was actually influenced a lot from the Back to Black album. And honestly, when someone asks me about, who could cover Amy Winehouse really well in this city, the first person that comes to mind to me is Shalmali. I mean, matter of fact, she did a tribute to Amy Winehouse back in 2011 when she passed away. And so I called her. I was like, hey, there's this song here. Would you be down to collaborate on it? She's like, I would love to hear it. Please send it over. And I started to pen down lyrics. A friend of mine who's also a lyricist and a poet in Pune, her name's Juhi Sharma, amazing writer, helped me pen down these lyrics. And I reached out to Shalmali. I was like, okay, so I did reach out to you about the song, but here's what it's about. And here's why it means a lot to me. And she read the lyrics. She heard the melody that I somehow managed to come up with. And she said, this is beautiful and I would love to be a part of this. And it's very different from stuff that she'd done before. So that was a very personal connect. And that was for the first single. The other single, which came out in a month after that, was A Leap of Faith again. Trisha Grace Ann, who sings and raps on the second single called The Queen, is the most upbeat song on the album. And it stems, like, the way I sort of explain it is, hey, you remember what MIA sounded like at the beginning of Slumdog Millionaire? Like, okay, it's that sort of sound that I'm drawing inspiration from. And and as opposed to the rest of the album that can have shades of like darkness to it, this one is a lot more in your face, a lot more aggressive, a lot more adrenaline, saying like, hey, this is me, this is all of me. I'm willing to accept all of who I am and warts and all. And I'm okay being that. So that's really what that song is about.
So now my next question for you, it's personal with you. So where does Zain Calcutta Wala ends and Bullibain Bridge begins?
At the risk of sounding very corny, Bullibain Bridge is a part of Zain Calcutta in some way. But no, but to really try and explain that in a more genuine way, I think that when it comes to the music that I'm putting out, I do feel that the persona, for want of a better term, of Bullibain Bridge is where like that creative outlet of mine kind of shines. But I think that everything that I've been able to put out as an artist, as Bullibain Bridge, or even as not as Bullibain Bridge as such, but when I'm producing other artists, for example, or when I'm collaborating with other musicians in some way or the other, I feel now that there is this sort of like nexus where me as the producer and Bullibain Bridge are kind of like intertwining now, where I'm just starting to, it's like, I feel like with Bullibain Bridge is where I'm just really starting to understand my own voice as an artist. And it's just through that moniker that I'm able now to like articulate that side of me better as Zain Calcutta Wala. I don't know if that's making sense, but it's kind of like an amplifier as a creative outlet for Zain Calcutta Wala is what Bullibain Bridge is, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Thank God. Okay.
So who are the artists who really fired your imagination, when it comes to music?
So in recent years, or actually, let me go all time. So I would say my all-time favorite album, without really thinking too hard about it, would be Nevermind by Nirvana. Because I remember I heard that album for the first time maybe when I was 11 years old. And Come As You Are is honestly one of my favorite songs, if not my favorite song of all time. So my heart really, especially from the early start of my career, lay in rock in a very big way. So that album for sure. I remember when I was growing up, we were really big on Michael Jackson and we were always talking about who could do the best moonwalk and stuff. And even on the Thriller album, even till date, Beat It is one of my favorite songs ever. And that guitar solo is just like mind-boggling. Even the story about the guitar solo is just inspirational, in that when Eddie Van Halen was called in to play it, like the speakers in the studio literally caught fire as he was playing it. It's one of those like old stories that everyone sort of knows. And I was just like, wow, these are such amazing, interesting stories. And like based on these kind of inspirations, I love the Foo Fighters as well. Like they're a band that I would probably cry if I saw live.
Talk to us about the music business, during your time and the music business now. I know there will be a big drastic change. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, okay. Well, actually, let me just try and talk big picture really. Like I feel that the For me, I feel like the biggest change, especially in the last 10 years, has been the representation of independent music in, ironically, mainstream media. And what I mean by that is back maybe 12 years ago or 10 years ago, indie was pretty much in indie was basically just what the name sort of described. It was purely independent. And there were maybe just like a few, in my opinion, there were just like a few select bands that really had made a name for themselves over a span of certain years. And they were doing well. There were certainly smaller independent bands that existed, some of which were very good, some of which, were just sort of starting out. But compared to what it is now, compared to, how, like, say, especially with the advent of OTT platforms, how a lot of independent music is also now being used, say, in sync in that case, or how bands are also being called to be like, hey, can you compose a song for this particular thing? Or they're being used in, say, ads. Like, for example, a guy that I have done a lot of work with, Raghav Miatal. I've produced most of his music. One of his songs off of his debut album was used for a Bumble ad campaign. And that was like the first time I got any sort of sync anywhere. So that was cool. So I feel like that untapped area of India's music potential is what's really starting to blossom now compared to like 10 years ago. Yes, of course, the big ones obviously will still be around and they'll still be doing their thing, but it's the parity is not as divided or as far apart, I feel, as it used to be. There's still a long way to go in certain areas, but there has been an evolution in terms of musical aesthetic just across the board, and that's obviously informed how business is conducted.
So, Zaid, people are talking about Indian music making it to the international music stage, global music and all that. So, do you think it is possible or even desirable?
I do think both, yes, possible and desirable, because I feel like for a very long time, there's this, and a couple of friends of mine in the music industry in the UK have told me in so many words where they just say, hey, when this particular country thinks about Indian music, there's this fetishization of what Indian music is, which is like with a lot of traditional instrumentation, or even if you take contemporary Indian music or pop Indian music, there will always be some element of it that makes it like, okay, this is intrinsically Indian. Like whether that means like you've got like a tabla loop or a santoor or anything in between. Pick your poison. So and that's a bit unfortunate, but that's just been the stereotype for as long as the music industry has existed, as far as India is concerned. So I think that, when you also look at how, say, Indian hip hop has been evolving over the past few years, yes, there are Indian elements to it, but there is also plenty of Indian hip hop that doesn't, quote unquote, necessarily sound Indian, whatever sounding Indian means. If we're just talking about language, I don't think that necessarily means that something sounds like one culture or the other. I think at the end of the day, that's just music. I mean, you can use the same argument with, say, K-pop, how it's such a big cultural phenomenon globally. But when you look at the production of K-pop, a lot of it is very pop based. A lot of it is very like guys like Max Martin, who's one of the biggest pop producers in the world. He'll do stuff with K-pop. You have the biggest mix engineers in the world from the US or the UK mixing for them as well. It's kind of like, to use Lizzo's words, it's about damn time. So I feel like this gradual incline is on the horizon, and I feel a lot of it will come even more so with collaboration with artists from here, there, and everywhere, which is also something that I'm hoping to do at some point.
What about the English indie music scene here in India? What future does it have in India?
That's a good question. I should also caveat everything that I've said, that like this is not based on research. It's just based on my opinions and like my experiences over the years. So, take it with a pinch of salt if you like, of course. But like with English music over here, The truth is, I don't know, but I'm hopeful. Like there seems to have also gradually over time been like a little bit more of an increase in demand or intrigue for English music, and that's great. I mean, I'll continue to make and produce English music, but there are also certainly artists who may have, started off doing Hindi, for example, or another language, but they've also like switched to English, and they may have come back. So I think that English is, in my opinion, relatively more of a slow burner than it is, say, like, for example, Hindi.
All right. Thank you so much, Zain, for this wonderful conversation. Once again, we wish you the very best with your future endeavors.
Thank you so much, Jen. That was honestly a very interesting interview. Like I had to think. So I really appreciate it.